Welcome to Divine Downloads. This is your host, Cassandra, and this is the episode that a lot of you have been asking for, which is all about how I found my husband to be and our love story and my journey along that. So many of you have expressed interest in signing out and see engagement. So here you go, an unadulterated look into my private and personal life that I'm hoping will also be really helpful for any of you guys out there moving through your relationships right now, looking to find your person. My hope is that this is inspirational and offers you some tools that you can learn from some of the things I did right in this relationship that I got wrong in a lot of ones before. But before we get into that, I have to take a little commercial break for my own program, the Miracle Mastermind. So the Miracle Mastermind is gearing up to kick off first week of February, and we are accepting enrollments right now. If you feel called this year to do the full 365-day workbook of A Course in Miracles, if you are ready to totally dive into this deep metaphysical mind reprogramming from a consciousness based on fear and lack and scarcity to a consciousness that's connected to love, abundance, and infinite potential, then I really hope that you check out the link below, the Miracle Mastermind. Look into that. I'm going to be putting a mini podcast up after this episode that just really explains the Miracle Mastermind, answers some frequently asked questions. I did this with Divinely You as well, and you guys really loved it and appreciated it being in podcast form. So I'm going to do that for you again. So look forward to that. And without further ado, let's dive into my love story. Well, I feel like my love story actually began with the man that I dated before I met Patrick. So I had been in this relationship with this man for maybe 6 months, I don't know. And we had been friends for longer than that. And when that relationship ended, I really feel like that was when the shift happened where I really got open and clear to call in my forever man. um, and what happened, and some of you guys may be able to relate to this, or maybe not if you've been happily married for years, but fresh off the dating scene. I realized that when that relationship ended, and a lot of this was because I was also unpacking this, with my therapist, was really looking at how I had been chronically dating men who could not provide me with what I wanted. So I had been saying to myself, and I feel like this, oh my God, we do this in every area of our lives, right? I had been saying, this is what I want. Like, I want a committed relationship. I'm ready for my partner. I've had so many wonderful years at this point of dating fabulous men, traveling all over the world, living, a certain kind of lifestyle that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm super grateful with my work and with, my romantic life, that I was ready to truly settle down, find someone I wanted to start a family with, and ground myself a bit more. And so what I saw was that I continually went for men that were kind of from that, like, let's say the former chapter of my life, right? I was going for these men that lived similar lives where they were traveling all the time, were doing all these things, where they were really purpose driven and all that stuff, which was all great, but they were just not ready to commit. They were not ready. They didn't have that in their 3-year plan, let's say, that I really want to find my person and settle down, so to speak. And so accepting that was huge for me, and it opened me up to the possibility of looking at different men. And one of the things that, how I actually met Patrick, which is pretty hilarious, was it had been like about a month and a half only after this breakup. And I had done all of this like deep work and gotten really clear around, I had made these choices that weren't actually aligned with my greater goal, right? It's kind of like, when we say like we want to get to that next level in our business, but then we don't ever, we don't ever actually want to like allocate the time or take the leap or invest in the things that we need, right? We say we want to make this thing a priority, but then our actual actions and our choices aren't reflecting it. So I'm sure you can see that in a lot of areas of your life. But I had finally made that distinction in romance, that my highest aligned vision was actually not lining up with the choices and the actions I was taking, where I was investing my energy and my time. And so I had gotten really clear about, okay, well, what do I want? And I had this night with some of my girlfriends where we just got together and we meditated and we wrote out these lists, which I'm sure everyone has heard of by now, right? We wrote out these lists of what we truly wanted in a partner. And I will say, this had not been the first time. I'd always been a really hesitant to write out these lists because I'd always been of the school of, you know what, he's going to surprise me. I don't know, like, I don't want to confine him. I don't, whatever, right? But the thing is, the list is not about identifying like what a guy's job is or what color his hair is or how tall he is or whatever. I mean, you can add those things if you feel a specific urge about something, but it's really just about the characteristics of him and the characteristics of your relationship. And so this time I wrote the list, I got more unapologetic than I've ever been, like ludicrous to the fact when I read out my list, there was a part of me that was like, you're asking for way too much. And one of the things that was really notable that I had always, literally, since I can remember, since I even like thought of the idea of getting married to someone when I was younger, knew that when I met my person, it was going to happen faster than the average bear. I always thought that within like 6 months or so, we'd be engaged. It would be something that we would know right away. It would, like, I just knew deep down in my body and my cells that it would not be this kind of like longer courtship where we dated for a year, we lived together for a year. Then like it was going to be like, we were just going to know, it was going to be like magnets, right? And I also knew that he was going to show up for me in a way that I hadn't experienced before. I knew that he was going to be persistent and consistent, and he was going to embrace my eccentricities, that he was going to provide this feeling that I was going to feel. I had this feeling when I did my meditation and I visualized, a lot of you guys who have followed me for a while have probably done that rock star day meditation or visualizing that. In almost all my programs, I have you visualize on a regular basis what your ideal day is. And so in my ideal day, I always had this vision of me meditating in the morning, and this like feeling of him in the apartment or the house and him getting his breakfast together or whatnot. Like this feeling was just this feeling of unconditional love and this feeling of someone that like supported you no matter what. And so I just wrote all of this stuff down. I just got really like, you know what, I could reach this point in my life and where I loved my life. I have a great business. I get to do what I love for a living. I am helping women every day expand their lives and reach their dreams. I get to write books and give talks and lead meditations and have a podcast and have this business that I've truly created from my heart and from my soul. And I have amazing friendships and I travel and whatnot. So I kind of got to this place where I was like, life is really good right now. And I don't need someone that's not going to add to that. Right. And then I also really knew in my heart, I have not been able to settle for anything in my life. And, it's kind of like a running joke with my parents, right? Where they were always like, yeah, like you can't make me settle. I'm like physically allergic to settling in any area of my life. And I've always kind of been that way. It's why I've had to do my own thing and I've had to kind of create the life that I have right now. And so I just knew that I would never be able to settle in my relationships. I would never be able to be with the guy that was good enough, right? It would haunt me, right? I would not be able to say. And for any of you guys who have been in that relationship where you have like that guy that checks all the boxes on paper and then and then you're just like, but I don't feel it. It doesn't feel that way. You know, I never really knew until Patrick what it was to what the feeling was like, what that feeling is like when you find your person. But now that I know, I'm like, oh my god, like nothing else compares. It's unmistakable. And I think that's, you know, if you talk to a lot of your married friends, a lot of them will echo that as well. If they're in happy partnerships, that it was just this, it's just this, you know, undeniable feeling. You just know. Anyway, back to us dating. So we actually met through an app. So I was in this phase and I wasn't really, you know, I was still kind of, you know, taking some time after that relationship, not really intending to find anything serious right now, but was still like, okay, you know what? I want to go on some like duty dates, so to speak. I just want to like get out there and kind of like cleanse my palate from my ex, which is something that I like to do between relationships, where essentially I just go on dates with interesting gentlemen and allow myself to just kind of truly experience that there are a ton of different options in the world. There are a lot of other attractive, interesting men in the world, and I don't need to kind of like, you know, linger on someone that didn't work out. And so I had been on like a week of doing this, and I had set up dates. I'm just like, when I want to do something, I just like want to get it done. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to like blitzcrank this. I'm going to go on a date every single day. And by the end of like a week or two, I'm sure my palate will be fully cleansed, and then I'll just kind of like retreat and like go back to focusing on work for the rest of the summer, and I'll reemerge in the fall and perhaps start dating more seriously. So Patrick was date number 2 that week, and I remember that night really not wanting to go out. I was doing something for my business. I was not feeling super pretty. And I put on like literally like a turtleneck and like comfortable jeans. And I was just like, whatever. His saving grace was that he actually picked this restaurant in Abbot Kinney that I had been dying to try. It was cosmic. It was cosmic because if he had literally probably picked like a lamer place to go, I may have canceled. But something about, one, that he picked this restaurant that I was really interested in trying, and 2, that I had like committed to myself that I was just gonna do this, that like this was just a palate cleanser week. So I go. I didn't even realize at the time that he was driving up from Orange County. So he had like operated that day and was driving up an hour and a half to go on this first date with me. And we went out, and I remember after that date, it was like, that was the first time, I'm sure if any of you guys can relate to this, after you're kind of like healing after a relationship, it was kind of like the first time where like I was so present. I was so present in the moment. I enjoyed like every second of our conversation. The night flew by. You know, a lot of times when I call it like duty dating, it's because, you know, you can be in that space where even if the guy is amazing, you're still kind of like in your head, or you're just like not there yet, or you're just not open. But there was something about him that just like I could not help but be present, and we had this great conversation, and you know, we we're trying all these different foods, which I love, obviously. And it was so fun. And so I remember after that night being really surprised at myself. I think I actually said something to him at the end where I was like, you know, I actually had a really good time with you tonight. And he was like, "Oh well, I'm glad I'm glad you're shocked by that, but I had a really great time too. When do I get to see you again?" And I was actually going away for my friend's wedding, like that Sunday, for Sahara's wedding. For those of you who have followed that whole as well, and I was like, "Well, I'm leaving for Hawaii for like a week on Sunday, but I could see you on Saturday for dinner if you want." So he's like, "That's perfect, you know, pen me in, let's go out on Saturday." And so I don't need to give you like the whole play by play of every single day we went on. But I will say the notable things, I was in a real space of surrender. It wasn't like, as much as I had a great time, there wasn't like this feeling of like, oh my God, this is my husband, right? I didn't know he was my person until we went to Europe together. And so, but I think he knew much sooner. And he goes back and forth about this, but I think it's just because he's a little embarrassed that he knew first. But he, on our second date, no, it was our, yeah, so I think after our second date was when he knew. On our third date, so I literally had this crazy travel thing where I was back Hawaii, between Hawaii and going to New York for another trip. I was in town for 48 hours and I already had plans to go to a Grateful Dead concert with my friend. But she was like, okay, well, I'm going to ask the guy she's dating to go. Why don't you ask this guy to come? So I literally told him, I was like, I'm only going to be back in LA for 48 hours. I'm going to go to this Grateful Dead concert. You want to come with me? That's your chance to see me while I'm home. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until I'm back from New York. So he was like, on it. That sounds amazing. Let's do the Grateful Dead. Whatever. So at that concert, this is our third date. At that concert, we talk all the way through it, which, if you know me, is really rare for me because I love the Grateful Dead. And I love to just like jam and like be mellow and like move to the music. So I'm not like a talker during those kinds of concerts. So we talk through the concert and I end up kind of casually inviting him to meet me in Berlin. So I was going to New York. I was going to be back home for a week. And sorry, this is too logistical, but some of you guys might enjoy all this story. And for those of you who don't, then it's okay. I promise there are bigger overarching lessons to be learned in this. But I just felt comfortable and didn't honestly think he would take me up on it, but was like, I'm having a pretty good time with this guy. My travel schedule is insane, so I know it's going to really interrupt us getting any momentum dating, but let me just throw it out to him. I was like, I'm going on this refugee trip. I'm visiting Greece and Germany. I'm going to end in Berlin, but then I've already planned a week of traveling after where I'm going to do Berlin for a few days, Copenhagen, and then Paris. If you want to join for any or part of that, you're welcome. Otherwise, I'll be back whatever day it was, right? And he was like, are you serious? I would love, like, he speaks German. So he was like, I'd love to, meet you in Berlin and come with you for the rest of your trip if you're open to that. And I was like, yeah, okay, and he booked the ticket. He just booked the ticket and he showed up and he was like, I have a special feeling about this. And he was like, yeah, some of my friends are telling me it's a little crazy, but I just have a special feeling about you and I'm willing to bet the house on it, so to speak. I'm going to go all in. And so this made me so nervous, honestly. And I remember even, we went on a couple more dates before we ended up meeting in Germany. And I was still so nervous before he came because I knew that on that trip I would know. I am someone that doesn't travel. I travel a lot and I don't travel with people often. Like I usually am kind of an independent traveler where I'll like have my own room, do my own thing, and I'll be with a group or whatnot. But I'm not someone that like partner travels a lot. And so I knew spending that much time with him, mind you, before this trip, maybe this is TMI, but like we hadn't even been up to each other's apartments. So we hadn't even spent an overnight, here. So it was definitely, living life on the edge, but, c'est la vie. I can't say that's not my style. And it was also really, for me, I think it was a big showing of the kind of person he was. And that kind of met me where I'm at, where I do want someone that is down to do that kind of thing, even right now, like we're planning like a last minute, ski trip to the French Alps because some of his friends are getting together. That is something that I love. That's like part of my lifestyle, kind of like impromptu travels and going all over the world. And that's something that I think if I didn't have a partner that appreciated that, one, it would just be harder to sustain and I would feel constrained. So, when I'm going to Bali with my girlfriends or doing something else, even if he's not coming with me, the fact that he gets it is huge. So anyway, I passed that test, and it was when we were in Copenhagen, um, that I remember this one morning, I had a very personal incident that I was embarrassed about, because it was, so new in our relationship, and I felt so vulnerable. And he handled it like a flippin' champion. And without skipping it a beat, it was like in that moment, I saw him not as this guy that I didn't even know if was my boyfriend at the time, but I was just like, oh no, this is my husband. Like, this is going to be the guy that, like, holds my children. This is going to be the guy that's going to, like, see, like, the full spectrum of me and be able to hold it and, like, show up for it. um and also, obviously, on that trip, the fact that, like, we are we both have different styles of how we travel, but he so seamlessly was able to intuit, um, what I needed, when I needed space, when I needed support. What, like, he was just tuned into me so well. And it's so funny because, he's so science. He went to med school. He's a surgeon. He is so type A. He's so very, like, he's Libra, Virgo rising. He's, like, very clean. Um, and I'm the opposite. I am like this, like, magical hurricane of sorts. And so I think sometimes opposites do attract, and I've done that in the past. But I think what the difference was now, once I knew that, yeah, opposites attract, and that can be, like, super sexy and hot and heavy, but can this person actually sustain, like, day to day life with me? um and honoring those flows and honoring, like, what I'm gonna need. And when we were in Copenhagen, he actually even found, because I had made a bunch of comments about how we're gonna be there for a new moon, and I wanted to do a cacao ceremony, and I heard about this thing. And he literally researched, because I ended up getting so consumed with my refugee trip and focusing on that and being there that I didn't have time to, like, plan anything for our trip. And he researched, and this guy who had never been to, not even, like, a yoga class, like, found us a cacao ceremony for the new moon in Copenhagen, and went to it with me, and had, like, we had this beautiful transformative experience where he had, like, these, memories from his childhood. I was the one, actually, that felt so uncomfortable and self-conscious. And we both had such a growing experience from it. It was those little moments that just, like, spoke to my soul and made me realize, like, wow, like, this is really something different. And it wasn't just I'm trying to articulate it in little memories and moments to help you, but it was more of a feeling than anything. It was like these little instances, and the way just he held me and took care of things really just showed me this is, like, life partner material here. And not just, like, could be a great husband to someone, but, like, this, like, we are a really good team, a really fun team, where we're both expanding each other's knowledge about things, because he had a lot of beautiful knowledge, from having a European background, that he could share with me. And the way I look at things is completely different, where, I'm looking at a lot of the spiritual significance, the different places that we go to. So it was just a really beautiful, expansive thing. And so, I think we both, after that trip, it was just like, we knew it was on. There were no games. I think that's something that people had told me over and over and over again that I never believed when I was single. People were always like, you don't, when it's your person, you don't have to play a game. When it's your person, you don't have to, like, wait to text them. When it's your person, you're not going to have to do that. I will say, as a caveat to that, I was very much in my power when we met. And so he did most of the footwork. He was the one that had to continually rise to meet me and come to me, in the beginning of our relationship, especially. And he even made a comment about it once, I remember, because he was like, we were out on a date once, and he said, out of all the women that I've dated, I've never, like, you never call me. I've never had that before. Like, you never reach out. Like, And he was like, but at the same time, there's like part of me that sometimes doesn't want to reach out and like see like, okay, well, is she ever going to reach out? But then there's the other part of me like that is mature and would never do that because I don't want to, I know I want to talk to you and I know I want to see you again. And until you tell me, hey, I don't want to see you again or I don't want to talk to you anymore, I'm just going to keep coming. And I was like, well, of course, like every time you reach out to me, it's always a favorable response. I'm always happy to hear from you. I always get back to you in a timely manner. Like there's no like things like that. I'm just in a place right now where I really love sitting in my feminine. I really love letting you come to me. And I really love focusing on my work and my friends when you're not around. And he was like, all right, fair enough. Well, I promise to always call you. And I told him, and I promised to every once in a while surprise you and ring you. And it was really funny because the times I do call him, or especially in the beginning, now we've kind of evened out because we live together, but in the beginning when I would call him, he would be like, oh my gosh, what do I owe this great honor that the lovely Cassandra Bonsack is ringing my phone? And ladies, I think that matters. I think it was a helpful dynamic. That, like I said, it wasn't a game because that's just where I got in the work that I've done in my life and the spiritual work I've done and the amount of work I've done around my worthiness and in making my life truly something that I feel proud of and that I feel connected to and that really lights me up in and of itself, that I was able to just come from that place and also just acknowledge. I think it goes back to that place where I had acknowledged that that was something that I really wanted. That might not matter to a lot of people, but I love the fact that like I have never ever at one point in our entire relationship wondered if he was going to call, wondered if I was going to hear from him. And to this day, he is excellent at communication. He's excellent like when I'm traveling, he'll text me, he'll text me in the morning. He'll coordinate our schedules. So if he has a break in his surgeries, he can FaceTime with me. Or if I have my break, my thing, he is on it. And it's not, and I don't have to, it's not something I have to force. It's not something I ever have to like enforce. I can't even tell you the amount of men before I met him that I would literally have to like request a once a week phone call from, which now seems completely absurd. And once again, if that's not your priority, then that's not your priority. But I think also that was something that I was able to do because I was really in that unattached place. I will say, even after our trip to Europe, when I was more attached in the way of I had that feeling, it was so different because it wasn't like, oh my God, I have this feeling and I hope he has it too, or I have this feeling and now I better not mess it up or whatever. It was just like, I have this feeling, I know he feels the same way, and it's on. Like, and I still feel safe and secure in that place. And one of the other those things that I wrote down about like him really taking the lead, when I was on my list when I originally wrote it with my girlfriends, about him beating me to every punch. And he really did. Like, he invited me on a ski trip he had already planned to Austria the next month or 2 months later. And so when we were in Austria together, we was just joking around and brought up like, oh, like we should buy a house out here in Austria. So we have like a European vacation home in the mountains. It's so beautiful. And it's like fairy nature, paradise up there. And I really loved it. And he really loves it. And I was like, yeah. Like that's totally for sure. I think we should probably work on getting some California real estate for our main place before we do that. But I think that's in the future. But again, like just like being very like kind of like off the cuff, but practical, I guess, phrasing my opinion. And I can't even remember now how he swung it around, but somehow he swung this around to us living together. And he was like, he's like, well, we should probably live together, for like a year. And then we could like buy a house in California. Mind you, I don't even know how long this was into dating. Like 3 months into dating? 3 months into dating. And I was just like, yeah. And he lives in Orange County. That's where he's a neurosurgeon, and he's attached to a hospital down here and has his like offices down here. And so for them, it's a little bit different because when they start out their practice, you build up like your clientele in a certain area. So it's much harder for them to move than it is for me to move, obviously. So that was one of the things he brought up. He was like, listen, realistically, well, I definitely want LA to always be a part of our lives. Like, I'm going to have to stay in Orange County. Would you be willing to, or you be open to moving down here? And I was just like, at first I had some resistance to it. But when I really meditated on it, I was like, no, I'm ready for this next stage of my life. I can commute back to LA when I need to. And, it's not like I'm moving to like Idaho. Like I'm moving to like literally an hour away from LA. So it's very drivable if I need to be there. And I was like, yes, I would. And it was just, again, it was like a pretty casual conversation. And when we got back from Austria, I remember he told me one day, oh, I set up a couple apartments for us to look at. I was like, oh, okay, it's happening now. And he was like, yeah, well, I guess like, let's, why not? Like I think his lease was up in, I don't know, end of September or something like that. So he was like, let's look at it. And it just kind of happened. And I was like, wow, he's like really beating me to every punch. But I will say I have not been the girl that would jump into that. I'd actually never lived with anyone before him. I don't take those leaps in relationships lightly. I'm not someone that genuinely like rushes into things or like gets super serious with someone right away. So for me, it was a real big intuition and gut check. The fact that every time we met, he kind of like, let's say, pushed me to a new level of commitment. I don't know, invited me to a new level of commitment, I think is a better way of saying it. That I would check in with myself because my mental mind, and I don't know if any of you guys can relate to this in different ways in your relationship or your business even, but my mental mind was more programmed into the old habitual patterns, right? And I think this is a really big thing if you're looking for a breakthrough in any area of your life, whether it's relationships, business, health, whatever. You have to realize that your mental mind, right? We think, gosh, like 60,000 thoughts a day, 90% of them are the same as yesterday, right? So what often happens is even if our intuition is saying yes, 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 our mental mind can be like, no, we don't do that. Or like, oh, it's too soon. Oh, it won't work out. Oh, you tried that last time, right? Our mental mind can kind of try to kaput it, but it's only doing that because it's coming from a place of fear. That's actually in A Course in Miracles thing, where it talks about the things you look on, you're actually looking at the past, right? So when you're actually talking from the past, you're relating from the past. So sometimes what happens is we get into these places where our mental mind is running our racket. It's running our typical pattern, right? And in that moment, I was really lucky that even though my mental mind was like, is this too soon? Like, you've never lived with a guy, da da da, this whole thing, right? My full body was like, this is a hell yes, girl, celebrate. This is like, you found your person and you can trust it and it can actually be this good. And I think that's a big lesson for everyone, right? It was a really big lesson for me, not only in relationship, but it's been like that with business on certain levels as well. It's almost like we don't there's so much of us that doesn't believe things can be that good, that when they are, we are literally like a deer in headlights. We're freaking out because like, oh, it's not supposed to be this easy. Actually, it wasn't supposed to work like that. Wait, I just signed that client. Wait, they asked me to speak and they're paying me what? I got that book deal. Oh my God, this man loves me. This man that I love loves me and wants to live with me or wants to marry me or whatever the thing is, right? It's almost like we freak out because we're not able to receive. Once again, this is why, I mean, not to be like, not to be annoying, but I'm going to be annoying right now. I'm a living testament to the work that I preach to all of you guys to do, right? If it hadn't been for gosh knows how many years of my Course in Miracles practice, retraining my brain so that I was able to see what I like to call the miracle moment, which I really feel like that has given me, my meditation and my Course in Miracles practice, is it gives me that moment where I can see, okay, this mental projection of mine that's coming is from the past, right? But when I can also reconnect to my truth and find that truth in it, that the truth is that's exactly what's meant for me. That's exactly how it's supposed to feel. And it only feels like it's too good to be true because my 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 mind and the consciousness of the world around me would have me believe that it had to be harder. Right? But when we're in the miracle zone, when we are in the divine connection, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think love more than anything, I think is something that I think is that little glimpse of in this world where we really get to experience how it can work when it's aligned. And I think I've been really blessed to, I mean, I say blessed, but I've worked my tush off spiritually, and invested a lot of time, energy, and money, honestly, in working on that mindset, right? And being able to receive at that level. I honestly don't think if I had met my person in my late 20s, I would have been able to receive him. I certainly would not have been ready for Patrick. And I do think I do credit tremendously all this work. And that's why I think this work is the work of your life, right? I can't even tell you. So many of my clients, we end up working on this, calling in their person, right? This is a huge part of your life. And doing this work actually allowed me to receive it, enjoy, and flow and go for it. And you best believe that there were people in my life that were like, you've only known this guy, was it 4 months or whatever, when we decided to move in together? Isn't this fast? And same thing on his end, right? And again, here's a guy that's science, practical, like practical in the dictionary, and was telling everyone, hey, like, I'm going with my gut on this. Like, I gotta go with this special feeling I have, which is so sweet. And now that, of course, that I know him so much deeper, he is so intuitive, and I feel like that could be a whole other podcast episode, because he's actually, he uses different language where he'll talk about like his gut, right? But he does a lot of surgeries where people's lives are on the line as a neurosurgeon. And he's told me about times where he'll be in the middle of a surgery and he'll just get this feeling in his body that he only has like X amount of time left before that person might pass on the table. And he's been able to prevent that. He's been able to close them up and end the surgery. And I mean, I'll have to bring him on the podcast. If you guys want that, shoot me comments, or leave a review and mention like love the podcast, but bring Patrick on for that episode or whatever. And so anyway, so he's very intuitive too. But I bring that back. I'm just trying to share my story, but also really highlight the parts that I want you guys to hear, as far as why I think this was able to happen as it was, as fast as it was, as aligned as it was. And one of the things I asked for was that one of the things I wanted was that we were engaged in about 6 months. And I don't know if it's been exactly 6, it's been a little over, maybe it's been 6 months. I'm trying to think. Dude. Yeah, it was about 6 months, a little bit over 6-7 months, on Christmas when he proposed. And it's interesting because both of us have said, on some levels, it feels really soon, but for us, it just feels like this is so natural. And I think, the people that have spent time with both of us, like his parents and some of our friends and stuff, also feel very much that way. Like, it's funny because he was saying, he was like, I was surprised that, like when like my parents, they were like, when he told them about it, he was like, they were very much like, we fully 1,000% approve and are so excited about this marriage. And Patrick had been married before, and so that was a huge thing. I think that was a huge thing. The fact that the people in his life saw how he was with me, saw how we were together, and knew that this was unlike anything else before, and that this was really true. And I think similarly for people in my life that have known me for a while, they've known that I've had a lot of long-term relationships and whatnot, but I've never, lived with someone before. I've never taken that leap for someone before. I would have never considered moving out of like the zone I love for anyone before. And yeah, it is. And so yeah, it's been the most beautiful thing. And I think, when we got engaged on Christmas, and the little backstory around that was that um, on Christmas it was also a new moon eclipse, and I had always been like, he knows I'm so, and you guys know because hello, all the podcast episodes. I'm such like a magical, auspicious date person, and so since we've been dating, I always make us like we always do a new moon ritual. We moved in together on a new moon in Libra, so we did a whole ritual for that about our intentions together. And then we do different rituals pretty much every new moon or full moon, or for 11/11 I made us do stuff. So he knows, and I always tell him about like what's going on. It's gotten to the pack where it's really funny because now like some of his surgeon friends will even like ask me what's going on cosmically. Like a bunch of like kind of mishaps happened during Mercury retrograde, and they were like, oh, Mercury retrograde, it's got us. So I'm infiltrating the medical field, and now they're I don't know if it's for the best, but they're being extra careful during Mercury retrograde. So feel confident about that. They definitely know how to. They're like stepping up their consciousness even more. But so he knows how much that's important to me. And it was funny because on Christmas Eve he invited me to his parents' house. We stayed in California because he was on call all throughout Christmas. So that whole week he was in and out of the hospitals, and there was actually like it was so sad. There was an insane amount of like kind of car accidents and a lot of trauma that went on during that. So he was in the hospital a lot, and he passed off one of the surgeries on Christmas Eve to one of his brain surgeon friends who was able to like go in and do it, because he was like, it's really important for me to go to Christmas Eve with my family and Cassandra. And, he had been working like crazy. So we go, and his family does a really beautiful, they're Polish, from Poland. And they do a very Polish Christmas Eve ritual with like the 7 dishes and prayers and blessings. And it's just very sweet. And so he knew I would love it, and we did that. And there was part of me that was like, okay, like maybe something's gonna happen tonight, because he seems to be like going out of his way to like make sure we're here for this. And then of course the night goes on, and we go through all the things, and we exchange gifts, and like nothing happens. Then we're driving home, and I'm kind of like, I'm a little deflated because I was like, well, I feel like my intuition was off. Like, I feel like I had this intuition. It was pretty strong, and I must have got it wrong. So anyway, we get home, and he's walking Carl, and I'm like changing for bed and stuff. And then he comes in, and he was like, hey, can you come in and like check out this thing by the tree? I think there is something on the tree for you. And I had given him his gift earlier that day because I wanted him to. I got him this really nice briefcase, and he wanted to take it. I knew he wanted to take something to his parents with his stuff in it, so I gave it to him for that. And he had already gotten me my Christmas gift like a couple weeks ago, which was the this computer that I'm recording this on. And so I thought we were like all done with Christmas gifts, but then in my head I thought, okay, well maybe since he got me like more of like a businessy gift, he like bought me something like a little, more like cute or whatever. Anyway, I'm looking under the tree. It's like all Carl's gifts. We bought Carl like all the gifts. So I'm like, there's no gifts for me. And I turn around and he's down on one knee and he was like, here, like this one's for you if you'll have it. And it was my beautiful ring. And I don't have to go through the whole mushy things he said, but safe to say, Patrick is 1,000 times more romantically articulate than me. And so, actually, as part of I don't know if it was part of the manifestation process or just, yeah, part of my process, I had written a little thing in the note section of my phone of what I was going to say to him when he proposed. Because it has been this thing. One, I knew I was going to propose. And two, like, I just knew that, like it was very clear between us that this was it, like that we were getting married, that we want to have a family, that like the whole thing. And it had also been this running joke between us about how he is like so much more romantically verbose and like would always say things like like I don't even know, I can't even think of things because I'm so bad at it. But he would always say these like beautiful things to me. Like when he told me he loved me, he was like, I've never felt this way about anyone before. I didn't even know I was capable of feeling this way. I didn't know like this kind of feeling existed. Like I feel just so grateful that I get to like experience it and be with you. And regardless of if you're ready or not to say it, because of how I am, he didn't think I was ready. he he was like, I love you, like I'm so in love with you and I love you or whatever. And it was so beautiful. And he was like, don't say anything, like you don't have to say anything. And I was like, me too, I love you. So anyway, we had this like running joke about that. And I was like, okay, so I really have to write something down so that whenever this happens, I have something really romantic to say back. So I wrote this thing that was romantic in my way, which is a little quippy back. And I told him, and part of that was what I told you guys before. I told him that, I never really knew what my husband was going to look like, or what he was going to do. I just knew how I was going to feel with him around. I told him in this little speech I gave, this little iPhone note speech, that for years I had meditated and visualized on what it was going to be like when I was at home in the mornings with that person there, and how it always just to me felt like this big hug. Like I was always held and supported and loved, even when they were not like physically in the same room as me. And I just like had this feeling of like how showed up for I would feel, and just how right and safe and perfect it would be. And um and and that's how I knew, was that I had been kind of feeling that feelings in that way for years, but I never actually experienced those feelings with another man until I met him. And that, that's like, how I knew he was my guy. So I feel like this is a super long episode. I hope I didn't bore some of you guys to tears. I feel like, I hope that you can, you enjoyed some of the juicy behind the scenes, and maybe we'll get Patrick on to give his side of the story perhaps. But all that to say, it doesn't mean that there wasn't any, I feel like the overall messages, because I'm a teacher at heart and I cannot just give you a gratuitous personal update without actually, discerning some lessons for you, right, that I hope you take. So one lesson I hope you take is that if you're not with your partner right now and you're ready for a partner, that the most important work you can do is your spiritual work. The most important work you can do is the work with your relationship with yourself, the work of being in a loving, receptive, open, worthy, abundant space of potential, right? Because in our romantic relationships, that's where our ego and our fear and our negative beliefs like pop up the most, right? And when you meet your partner, it does not mean that ish won't pop up. And it does. And it does at each little step of the way. I can say that because of the work that I have done, I was able to navigate it with much more grace than ever before. I will also say that yes, there is an element to when you actually find your right person, there is this kind of a different underlying feeling than there is before. So on some levels, I felt it was a little bit easier. I'll be honest with that. In certain levels, it was a little bit easier along the way to stay in that space because the energy I was feeling from him, and a lot of you guys that are listening are probably as intuitive as I am, my intuition about him was always so strong, right? I always, and when I look back at some of my more like crazy or, negative behaviors in the past of relationships, it was always because my intuition knew something was off. Right? That doesn't mean there were certain challenges that I didn't have to face, right? Like my fear wanted me to tell him to not come to Berlin. Like my fear wanted to call him up that night and tell him to not show up. Actually, a crazy story is his flight to Berlin got canceled because of he was in Miami for a conference. He was flying out from there. His flight got canceled because of some storm running through Miami. And he literally stayed all day in an airport to find any flight he could get so that he would still make it to Berlin in time after my trip was up. And literally, had to rebook his whole flight, spent like gosh knows how many thousands of dollars, and and told me about it after the fact. And I was like, babe, you didn't have to do that. Like I would have understood if you just couldn't make it. And he was like, there is no way I would ever tell you I was showing up for you and not do everything in my human power to like follow through on that promise. And this was after like a handful of days. And I was like, okay, I still don't know if I want you to be my boyfriend at this point because we haven't spent that time in Europe together yet. But I was like, this is a man. And this is a man that I can count on, right? This is a man who had like a bajillion reasons that I would have understood to cancel that flight and not show up in Berlin, right? And we had already booked the hotel, so he could have just been like, stay in the hotels. But he showed up. And so that showed a lot for me. But during that whole process, I'm not going to lie, I was super anxious about him going through all that for me. There was part of me that was still testing, can I receive a man that's willing to show up on this level for me, right? That's literally moving mountains to make sure he gets to me, right? That's took the next flight to LaGuardia because he thought he'd have a better chance flying out of New York to get to Europe, and is like sleeping in like the Delta One lounge or whatever, right? To make this happen, and just did, and showed up and didn't bring it up again. It was just like, I had to show up, And so it was at those places, right, where my receiving muscle was being tested, right? So it was a little bit different than sometimes in other cases where your anxiety is because they're not calling or they're not showing up, right? I think sometimes that is teaching you something. It is saying, okay, this person is not showing up in the way I want them to show up. And there's a certain element of, yes, when you get in your power, when you get to a place where you really love your life, where you are content in your own being, and you're not looking for someone to upgrade your life or save you from your circumstances. You're not looking for someone that's going to make you happy, right? You are a solid, glowing entity and secure in your own self. And that's not to say, of course, I don't see myself as like complete, so to speak. I have a lot more big things I need to do in the world, a lot of other things I'm constantly improving on myself. But I felt I have done enough work where I do feel whole in my season, and even in the growth that I'm in, right? And so I believe it's that energy that actually attracts the real deal partner. That's when you can finally call in this person that's going to be able to really meet you. Because I can say, if I had met him or anybody 5 years ago, I would not have been there. wouldn't have even hit it off, honestly, right? And also, I think when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about one of the exercises I have a lot of my clients do when we're working through stuff like this, like calling in their person, is asking themselves, okay, writing that list that I said, that unapologetic list of how they want it to feel, how they want this person to show up. But then also asking yourself, okay, well, what woman of my dreams do I need to be actually be a proper match for this person, right? Because if you want to attract someone that's, has a secure attachment style, that is confident in what they do, feels purposeful in their life, is putting in the work, is committed, is, taking care of themselves and their health, is, willing to have deep conversations, is whatever, right? If you want someone that has all this stuff, then you also have to take a look at yourself and say, okay, what parts of me am I, like, do I need to focus on to actually be the kind of partner that would meet them? And that's not to say that, like, oh, well, you need to make more money, or you need to be more fit or whatever to attract your partner. No, it's not that. It's that your standard, what happens is, if you don't do those things, if you don't, let's say, focus on doing what you love in your work, or having a happier disposition on a daily basis, or having a stronger spiritual practice so you're not constantly in fear and worry and spiraling, getting, on a healthy eating plan that makes you feel good, or whatever. If you don't do that and you meet your dream partner, you're not going to be able to hold the space for them. You're not going to feel worthy of them. And that is what will push them away. It's not any of those other, like, external things that push them away. It's going to be your overall vibration of "you're too good for me," And the thing that I feel, why, and I, I haven't said this to him, but my theory on this is, Patrick's a neurosurgeon. He's very successful. He's attractive. He's very fit. He's very emotionally intelligent. He's very articulate. He's got a lot of great things going for him, right? But I guarantee, and he's told me this, that, before me, a lot of the women that he'd meet on dates, they wouldn't be able to meet him, right? They would be either, like, they wouldn't be able to meet him head to head. And the thing that, I think one of the things that attracted him to me was that, even though I'm in a completely different world, and we have, we're so different in our careers and whatnot, he was able to have so much respect for me. And I was able to have respect for him as well in his career, but not I wasn't like a fangirl of him, I was like, literally, when I remember, hearing about what he does and asking him some questions about it, it was really from an energy of, for me, it was really important to find someone that really loved what they did, that felt really passionate about it, that had a strong work ethic about it, that was very ambitious about what they did. And so I was really looking for those things in our conversation, right? I wasn't in the, like, oh, it's so cool that you're a doctor or whatever, right? I was like, yeah, but why? But why did you choose this? But what made you go to medical school? But, how much do you enjoy what you do on a day-to-day basis? But where do you see your practice building, And so, I don't know, I say all that to say that working on you is the best thing, is the best investment you can do. Because then when you attract that person, you're going to attract your equal, right? You're going to attract a true partner. And you're going to be able to receive someone at the level that you dream of, because you've risen to that level in yourself, where you're harnessing your potential, where you're constantly expanding, where you are taking care of yourself, where you're showing up as the person you want to be in the world, and therefore can attract someone else that's in that same vibrational space. So I think that that's really important work to do if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm ready for my person. And the other disclaimer that I gave when I posted about the engagement was, it's so worth the wait. It's so worth the wait, ladies. I'm sure that's annoying. I know I certainly had people tell me that when I was, dating and frustrated. But it's truly the most beautiful gift. It's a feeling unlike any other. And I can't articulate into words just how, I feel like I've had so many beautiful successes in my business. I've had so many, I've had a lot of, been really, really grateful for a lot of amazing experiences I've already had in this lifetime. But I will say that finding your partner, finding your human, is just a whole other level. It's just a whole other level. Laying there in bed with him this morning, just cuddling before we got started for our day, I just remember thinking, like, this was worth everything. This was worth everything. Okay, well, this is getting long, so I'm gonna wrap us up. Feel free to get at me if after this podcast there are, certain things you want to dive more into. I do really truly believe, of course, in Miracles says this, and I believe this, relationships are really the teaching grounds of the Holy Spirit, are our biggest soul flexors. So that's not to say that, there haven't been moments of soul flexing. For sure, there have been moments where I've needed to double down on my spiritual practice. And we can get into some of those later, but I will say that that overall, relationships are huge. And if you're listening to this, I think the most important thing you can do is keep yourself in the game, keep working on yourself, keep getting yourself out there, keep meeting people, right? If I hadn't been willing to go out on a Tuesday night when all I wanted to do was stay home, order takeout, finish my work, I would have never met my husband. I could have easily just dismissed him as another guy on a dating app, right? And I'm so glad that I had the, commitment to be like, I'm going to do this even if I don't feel like it. I think oftentimes now, I'll leave you with this if you're online dating. We met on this app called The League, because I know all of you guys are going to ask that. And I think what happens with online dating, if you're online dating, it's so easy to just like connect with people and not actually meet them in person, or to bail out when when you set a date or something like that because other things come up and you don't have any stake in this person. When you meet someone at a party or through a friend or at a work thing, right? There's some like initial spark or some initial interest that allows you to keep that commitment to the first date. I think now in this modern age where a lot of us are on dating apps because we don't go to happy hours or we want to meet people but we have busy lives, it's really important to give yourself that first date. Meet people. If you go on a couple dates with someone and you're really not feeling it, then that's fine. But I think if you want to be in the game, you got to be in the game. You got to be playing, because it's just like in business or work or anything in your life, right? You can't win if you don't play. You're not going to attract Mr. Right staying at home. And for those of you guys that are, making business a priority in your life over dating, here's the thing. They can coexist side by side. I definitely think because I was largely focused on business but still honoring the space to keep those dating commitments. One, it brought a lot of balance to my life. Because I had cut off times where I had to shut off my Athena or my like working warrior goddess and swift into my Aphrodite and get some dating practice and get out in the world. It is good for the soul, and there's so much to learn, even if that person is not your guy, right? And two, just like with work, if you don't keep putting yourself out there, the first couple times you put yourself out there with work, I work with a lot of women that, are starting their own businesses and whatnot. You know what? You might have to go through a year of crickets, putting yourself out there, putting yourself out there, putting yourself out there before you land that big speaking gig, before you get those high paying clients, or before you get to whatever, right? But if you don't go through that year of crickets, where you're still putting yourself out there, where you're still kind of throwing spaghetti against the world, where you're still going out there and saying, that is saying to the universe, I believe that this is important to me. And so that is, I think, a huge, huge step for anything, whether it's your business or your health, right? It's like, you might have to go to the gym for a few months before you finally figure out like a good workout routine and start seeing results. But it's that showing up every day for that thing, like putting that thing that you want. And I'm just going to end on this, ladies, because you should not be ashamed if finding love, if finding your life partner is a priority for you right now. I think I felt a lot of that shame at times in my life, where I was like, I should be focusing on work. It shouldn't really matter that much. Why does it matter? Da, 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 da. It should just happen, right? Well, if you don't ever put any energy into building a business, or let's say putting anything out, or writing a blog, or putting anything, then I'm sorry, but you're not gonna meet some random person at Starbucks that's like, oh, are you a health coach? Can I work with you? No, you have to put it out there. And I think sometimes we realize that in other areas of our lives, that like, I'm just like, even though I can like pray and meditate for more abundance, I'm still going to have to follow some aligned actions. I'm still going to have to maybe get a part-time job. I'm still going to have to put out that, sales page or whatever it is, right? I'm going to have to do some things to also align with the energy that I'm calling in right now. It's the same thing with dating. I think sometimes we try to make it an exception, and it's not. It's not an exception. You can't, you have to be energetically creating that space for it in your life. Anyway, so that's just one of the things. If you want to dive deeper in this, I do one-on-one sessions. I do coaching, and it's randomly in the past year, even before I announced this engagement, a lot of the clients that I work with, this has been an aspect of our work together. So feel free to check out the links below if you're interested in talking about that further and getting clear on that for yourself. And then, of course, as always, I can't recommend this Miracle Mastermind enough. If you are getting the niggling feeling for it, it's literally going to be the most transformative experience I've ever guided anyone through, because this is way beyond me. This text, this metaphysical mind reprogramming has transformed my life these past 6 years, 7 years that I've been doing it. And I know without a shadow of a doubt the miracles and the magic and the complete shift in the way you operate in the world that awaits you if you are willing to make this commitment to yourself. So click the link below, check out the Miracle Mastermind. I hope to see you in there. As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to this whole podcast. Thanks for caring. I love you guys so much. You mean the world to me. If you listened to this episode and liked it, give a little screenshot, post it on Instagram, let me know you're listening to it. It does make a difference to me. I do notice, what episodes people like, and I want to give you guys what you like. So feel free to always reach out with new ideas or new things that you want for the podcast. And if you haven't left a 5-star review with a little comment for me, it means the world to me. It is the best way you can give back for this podcast and all the free content that I give, because it helps other amazing spiritual seekers like yourself find divine downloads and receive the same ahas and breakthroughs and guidance that you are. So thank you so much, and I will catch you